Hello, everyone. Welcome to All Things College and Career, the podcast to turn to for all of your college and career planning needs. We are your hosts, Meg Gary
and Bobby Ryan,
owners of academic and career advising services located in Kennebunk, Maine.
We started this podcast to provide helpful information to listeners researching careers, colleges, or academic majors. Choosing your career or college is such a big decision, which is why our motto is learn before you leap. Before investing a lot of time or money, it's so important to do your research and to really explore your options.
Each podcast will offer interesting stories and valuable insights that we think you will find entertaining and informative.
Subscribe to our podcast and you'll have it ready to go on your playlist every Monday morning. So, learn before you leap each week with us.
Today, we chat with Moira McKinnon, Director of College Counseling at Berwick Academy in South Berwick, Maine.
You've come to the right place if you want to get the inside scoop on the college admissions process from someone who has been instrumental in helping students find the right college for 24 years.
I know, amazing. Moira has some tips that you will not want to miss hearing.
Exactly, and also find out what a career as a college counselor is all about and if it's right for you.
Right, and with all of Moira's experience, any parent or student embarking on the college admissions process will learn a lot from this podcast.
You get that right. Let's get on to our conversation with Moira.
Let's do it. Good morning, Moira McKinnon. Welcome to All Things College and Career. Thanks so much for doing the podcast today.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, Moira. We are in my house today.
Yes.
First time. Seems strange doing a podcast here, but I'm liking it. So, Moira, you are the Director of College Counseling at Berwick Academy. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you people about Berwick Academy real quick. Full disclosure, my son went there,
and he was great.
Thank you. Berwick Academy is a college preparatory school located in South Berwick, Maine. Founded in 1791, it is the oldest educational institution in Maine and one of the oldest private schools in North America. It is pretty old, but
wow,
beautiful.
I had no idea.
I mean,
it is beautiful.
And then just recently, they started having some boarders too, right?
We do. We now have, it was 8 boys last year living in a house at the edge of Academy Street.
Right.
And it's a really interesting mix of kids from all the different age groups in the upper school and a lot of different geographic locations, including one international student.
Wow.
So it was real fun.
That's cool. I wonder if that's going to grow or if that's the intention.
The house that they're living in actually is an historic register property, so we can't do too much to change it.
Right.
And so maximum capacity is probably 12 boys.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. I'm just thinking about additional properties down the road.
Yeah,
And
we'll see.
Berwick, in its inception, was a boarding school.
It was. That's right.
Which is interesting.
So no girls at the moment?
No girls. They actually looked into opening 2 facilities at once. And in talking with a lot of people at different schools, the feedback they got was that parents would be nervous about sending girls to a new boarding program, but not boys.
Yeah.
And so if you started with boys and had that going for 2 or 3 years and had an established schedule and program and
Right.
oversight,
Something
then
they
parents
could
would feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And we actually had a lot of kind of blowback from some of the female alums when they first announced it was boys only
Yeah.
boarding. The girls
Right.
sort of said, wait a minute, what about us? And once they understood that dynamic, they all
Right.
said,
It's-
okay, well, we're going to wait.
Okay.
Right. We have the intention. It's
Right,
just
exactly.
not a couple years out. Okay. So, you've been at Berwick Academy. Well, you've been in this position actually for 23 years. Yeah.
Just finished 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maura, that's
And
amazing.
she looked young, everyone.
I know, everyone. When you see her,
You would
she's
never
like, wait
know
a
it.
minute. So when did you start? When you were 8 or what?
Yeah, right.
I know. But so in that position, can you please tell us 3 things that you love about your job?
Oh, absolutely. I love the students that I get to work with every day. Berwick kids are really down to earth and they defy the sort of private school stereotype of entitlement. The kids are generous and kind. They say thank you when they leave the classroom at the end of every class. They are so respectful of one another and of the faculty, and they're really grateful to be at Berwick. So they bring a really positive attitude to what can be a very stressful process in the college admissions world. And so working with them really is a delight. So that's absolutely the first thing. The second thing I really love about my job is the ability to travel and see lots of different places. Being a college counselor and getting out and visiting campuses, going to conferences, I get a chance to hear what's happening in other parts of the world from colleagues at other independent schools and other public schools. And I just love to travel. So that's really fun. I just got back from a conference in San Francisco, and next week I'm going down to Rhode Island, and in the fall we'll be at a conference in Kentucky. So I get to go all over the place and see really amazing parts of the country and the world. I got to do a trip to Scotland too.
Oh, that's
great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Is this through an organization like the NACAC or?
Yeah, the Kentucky conference will be the national conference, which happens in a different location every year. So last year it was out in Salt Lake City. This year, Kentucky.
Yeah, it's in Louisville.
Yeah,
my
is.
daughter's in Lexington, which is not far.
Oh, no kidding. I've actually never been to Louisville, so I'm really excited about it.
It's a great city.
Yeah.
Michaela says it's vibrant and
and she really enjoys Lexington. Yeah.
So San Francisco was through ACCESS, which stands for Association of College Counselors in Independent Schools. And that is a growing network of people who do my job in other private schools domestically and internationally. So that's a really helpful conference because you're really working with people that have the same kind of population and the same family expectations. Although Berwick families are way more calm about the process than a lot of other. Yes, absolutely.
I get that sense too.
Yeah.
Everybody seemed pretty chill about that. I mean, in Christian's year, at least, I couldn't believe the caliber of student that came out of that year. I mean, I'm sure that's all the years. It's just that's the year I know.
Right.
In Christian's year, they had 6 national merit finalists and 3 of his classmates went to Stanford. I mean, out of 70 kids, or maybe it was 71 or whatever it was, I mean, that's a huge percentage of. And kudos to you, Moira.
Oh, thanks.
But
it's really the kids that do it.
I know.
Honestly, that's one of the big reasons we wanted to get you in, because that is a huge accomplishment, getting 3 kids into a school of that caliber
and that low acceptance rate.
But there were a lot of other amazing schools that year.
And yes, that's it. I mean, many kids went to many great schools. That just stuck out because 3 into 1. If it was Harvard, I would have mentioned Harvard, or if it was any school. But it's just 3 into 1 school that they took them all from the same. Right. I mean, that just seems unheard of. That has to be some kind of record.
and we definitely want to dive into that process.
Yes, we do.
But just want to backtrack a bit and learn for you where it all began. So we know you went to Georgetown University.
I did.
Yeah, which is a fantastic school.
Go Hoya, right?
Yeah,
Go
Hoyas, yeah. Dear friend of my daughter's went there. So what happened in your past that made you go in this direction, or what inspired you to?
Yeah, it actually was an accident.
Oh, really?
I went to Georgetown fully intending to go to law school.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to go into politics. I was going to be in DC.
And Georgetown is the school for that.
Yeah,
and it is. And so many of my friends from Georgetown went to law school and are still practicing lawyers. My older sister went to Georgetown undergrad, and while I was at undergrad, went to Georgetown Law. And I watched her go through that. Her 3rd year of law school was my senior year of college. And I thought, I've watched this and I don't want to do this.
Right.
And,
but it was seen up.
Right. She's been in the library for 3 years straight and she's reading briefs about tax law, and I don't care about tax law and I don't want to do this. And so it was senior year and I suddenly didn't really know what I wanted to do.
So what was your undergrad major?
I was English.
Poli-sci,
it was English with history.
Okay. You don't really need any specific major to go into law
school.
Right.
And the idea was with choosing English just because I love to read and I've always loved literature, and I've always been that kid that will sit in a chair for 8 hours and not notice that the time went by and read. And so I thought, if I can do that for 4 years, this is fantastic. And with law school, it was you had to be able to read and research and write really well. And so I had friends prepping for law school that were government majors and poli-sci majors and history majors, and one was a Latin major. And lots of different things. And so it really didn't feel like I needed the political background necessarily to do the law school thing. But being in DC, we were around politics all the time. And that was the debate we were having outside of class.
For sure.
And so, I got to senior year and said, I don't really want to do this law school thing. Right. I had spent my junior year overseas and had an amazing experience going to college in England for a year and really wanted to travel more. And so that's what happened. Right about the same time I decided law school was not my thing, a couple of my friends applied for a program Georgetown had at the time to go teach in South Africa. And you could go for a year and they would give you a stipend for your living expenses. So I thought, well, I'll go do that for a year and I'll figure it out. And South Africa will be amazing.
Yeah.
It was 1993. It was the year apartheid was coming down.
Wow.
And so there was a political experience.
Yeah.
That for
And
sure.
so it was just
you were
amazing.
in the thick of it, huh?
It was
Were
just
your
incredible.
parents sleeping at night? knowing
No, my mother was horrified. She
Yeah.
actually, when I called and said, hey, so I just got this job, I'm going to South Africa, she started to hyperventilate on the other end of the phone.
Can
She
imagine.
was not amused.
Yeah.
But it really, it's an experience I wouldn't trade for the world.
For sure.
It was
for sure.
so different from everything. And it really informed so much of what I do as a teacher. And so much of my understanding of student struggles comes from watching these kids, because I was in an all Zulu school. It was a black school under apartheid still because it hadn't finished. And these kids had to pass national exams or they could not graduate. It was like if the SAT determined the rest of your life.
Oh my gosh.
That's so scary.
I would be doomed.
It was, yeah, me too.
Terrifying for
I'm
them.
not the test taker, right?
Yeah.
So watching their struggles reminds me of what's really important. And when kids are freaking out about something minute in the college process, I'm able to take a step back and say, all right, let's refocus on this because this is not life or death.
Right. It gave you a sense of perspective of what really matters and what's important.
Yeah.
That's such a great
Can
experience.
you actually, I mean, that's such an interesting experience. I would love to hear, I don't know, do you have a story you can think of from that time? You said, obviously, these kids were living under apartheid. And so can you give an example of like how that affected their school life?
Oh, sure. So mostly what I was teaching was English in the upper levels, and they're standard, they call them standards rather than grades. So I was teaching standard 8, 9, and 10 English, and 10 is finishing. But I was teaching standard 7 history, and we had to use the government issued textbook.
Right.
The government issued textbook had passages in there about all of the accomplishments that the Europeans had brought to South Africa.
Yeah.
And there was nothing in there about the culture or the accomplishments. And it was really hard to walk into a classroom and say to these students, we have to study this book. You have to know this material.
Right. This is what you're going to be tested on.
And you're not reflected in the material at all.
Right.
Like you've made no contribution.
But you acknowledged that head on, right? You just
did. And I said, there's stuff in here we're going to have to read, and we're going to talk about it a little bit beyond the bounds of the curriculum.
Right.
And so when we got to passages about that, we would stop and say, okay, this is what we're reading. This is where this came from. And I also made an attempt to bring in other sources. And because I was at a Catholic school, not a government school, I was allowed to do that.
Okay.
And so I was able to bring in my own material to add on to that. But there were times...
So you supplemented a bit.
Right. But there were times when you could just tell by the looks on the kids' faces that they were angry about what they were learning.
Right.
And
because they've probably grown up hearing the stories, of their great accomplishments and the things they've brought. Yeah, that's tough.
I mean, that's how history was taught when I was in school. It wasn't until I hit college that they started introducing anything besides the European experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you were teaching in South Africa and then...
Then I came home, and it was January because their school system, it being winter when it's summer here, is flipped. So January was the end of the year. I did a search for other teaching positions. I ended up at a boarding school in East Tennessee and was again teaching English and history, primarily history at that point. I learned really quickly I'm not a boarding school person. It really has a totally different feel to it, and you really have to be energized by extroversion. And I found out I was a little bit more of an introvert than I thought I was. So it was, again, a really amazing experience being in a totally different part of the world than I'd lived in before. It was a really small town. It was Appalachian, Tennessee. So very different environment. And so I learned a lot from that. But the boarding school thing was really hard for me.
Well, it's good that you learned that.
I did. So that year I came home from Tennessee for the winter break, and I came to an event at Berwick because I'm an alum of Berwick, and so I came to an alumni.
I should have pointed that out. I did know that, but glad you brought it up.
Yeah, so I came to the alumni winter reception that they do, and the head of school at the time, Hap Ridgway, said to me, we have this job opening up in college counseling, and I don't know if you'd be interested. And I said, well, I don't know anything about college counseling. And he said, that's okay. I'm a college counselor. I'll teach you.
Oh, wow.
I don't, to this
so
day.
So it's just happenstance, basically.
But I don't know why he did that, because he was not head of school when I was a student. So he and I didn't really know one another very well.
Wow.
And we literally were just talking over hors d'oeuvres. And he said,
he must,
hey.
That's how so many jobs happen, believe it or not. It's crazy. We're learning that more and more as we're doing this podcast, how people fall into positions. But obviously something about it really connected with you because you've just excelled at it.
I absolutely loved it from the first minute. Berwick has been really good to me the whole time with professional development. So before I even started, they sent me to a 9-day program at Harvard. They do a summer institute on college admissions every year, and it's it's Harvard programming, right? They're not slacking around. So it was really incredible. And it was a deep dive into everything that I would be encountering. And I absolutely loved it. And I came home from that so energized.
And ready to. Yeah. Okay. I want to continue on with this, but I just want to, before we move on, just for any listeners interested in possibly Georgetown as a college that they want to attend, could you give us just a few tidbits about it? Or
sure.
What
it's
could you tell
changed so much since I was there.
Right. But
just facilities are really different but the tenor of the school has really broadened its perspective since I was there. There's a lay president now. He was in Georgetown when I was there, so I know him. He's a great guy, Jack DeGioia, and he has really thought carefully about the student experience from a different perspective. I love the Jesuits. I mean, no disrespect to them at all. I mean, they are incredible educators. They push students to think in so many different directions. They're not there to tell you how to think. They're not there to make everybody Catholic. They really want you to come to your own beliefs and to own those. There is a different perspective of having a layperson in charge who is thinking a little bit beyond just the Catholic school experience. So they've brought in the student experience in terms of LGBTQ issues and women's issues. And it's always been a really international school, but I think they've focused as well on domestic policy. And actually in my world, you see that a lot because there's a Center for Education and Policy and Employment at Georgetown. And I'm not getting that name right, but they have done incredible research recently about economic disparity in the United States. And
the students actually voted.
And that's been a whole thing.
Sorry, that's a different subject entirely. Sorry.
So the center that does all this research is talking about preparing students for the professional world and issues around poverty and education and equality in the United States, and also looking at issues of racial and social justice within education and employment, which is fascinating. And it does feed in a lot to what's been going on at school, because a couple of years ago, the university acknowledged the funding that came to save Georgetown from the sale of slaves. And that's been a really hard reckoning. Georgetown almost went bankrupt in the 1840s, and they sold 278 people to get the money to keep the school going.
That is a tough reckoning.
Yeah. I was sitting in my living room reading the New York Times online when that headline came up on a Sunday morning, and I started crying.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like a crushing blow.
It's
a place you love, Georgetown.
It's not what you want to hear about a place that you love.
No.
Yeah,
it's not. And to think that the place that I went wouldn't have existed if it weren't for what happened to these people. And my son was 8 at the time, and I started crying, and he looked over and he's like, "Why are you crying reading the New York Times?" And I explained in 8-year-old terms, this is what happened. And he looked at me and said, "What are they going to do about it?" And I said, "Well,
good question."
And again, I tried to explain it, and I said that they're doing a commission, and they're going to create monuments, and they're having these conversations, and they're renaming buildings in honor of these people, and they're creating a scholarship fund so that the descendants of the people who were enslaved can come to Georgetown for free. And he looked at me and said, "Why would they want to?"
Oh my gosh!
And I went,
8-year-olds with the best questions,
right? And I went, "Oh gosh, yeah, I don't know." But actually, this year there have been stories that there are descendants who came to Georgetown and they graduated this year, and it was really, they had their own ceremony, and it was really wonderful. Georgetown absolutely did not get everything right in that, and they actually had a ceremony where they were creating this fund and having speakers, and they didn't invite any of the descendants to the ceremony. And you're like, what are you going through your head?
Yeah, right.
So the descendants, bless their hearts, went to the press and said, "We're not involved in this, and this isn't okay."
Right.
And they wouldn't let it go. And I'm so proud of them for holding Georgetown accountable and for making us have that conversation. And it's been really powerful. And as you mentioned, the student government this year voted for reparations. There's going to be a fee assigned to the students going forward. Well, the students voted for the fee. The trustees are still debating it, but we'll see. The students voted to have a fee assessed on every student's account to create more funds for reparations for these people, so that when the descendants come to school, they also don't have to pay for books, and they don't, they're going to have this whole account for them. And I, again, so proud of the students of Georgetown for being the first group of people to vote for reparations in the United States. It's amazing.
Kudos to them. I love that. Yep. Well, it's a good start.
And I'm sorry, I cut you right off on the economic disparity that they're addressing.
Oh, no, that's okay. They're creating a lot of data analysis, which is not my field at all, but for people that it is, to be able to say, this is what's going on with employment in the United States. And people are not being employed at the rate that they should be, not because they're not qualified in this moment, but because of all of the pieces that led up to this moment, with underfunded schools and with lack of college counselors in public schools and with racial discrimination and all of these pieces that can go into people having a college degree and still not being successful. And Georgetown's really looking at that beyond just Georgetown. And the center is more and more I'm seeing in the news, and not only for the reports that they're putting out, but they're being consulted as experts in the field for government policy being developed, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like they're doing a lot of great things. Well, that was a pretty good encapsulation.
Yeah, it was.
Is there a type of student that you think would thrive mostly there, or is it a good place for anyone?
Being a mid-sized school, meaning 5,000 to 6,000 students undergrad, which is similar to Tufts and some other places. You need to be more ready to take things in your own hands and push things forward. So you will be sitting in classes that might have 75 or 80 students, and you need to make sure you go to office hours and meet that professor. You will be doing course registration where you need to have 2 or 3 backups because you might not get into your first choice. So you need to be more proactive in getting the things you want. And that's a lesson that I didn't really learn till senior year. I was sort of floating along like, oh, this is great. I'm reading Victorian literature. And I didn't go to the Career Center, and I didn't go to my advisor very often to talk about my future plans. And so when I said, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer, they said, okay. And they didn't, I didn't use the resources that would have pushed me to really think that through.
Right. So but they're not going to come after you. You have to find those resources.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we should refocus back to the college admissions for all our listeners that are excited to hear from you. What are some tips and advice you can give to students and parents about to embark on the college admissions process? Obviously, you are sitting on a wealth of information and experience, so I think you have a lot to share. And something actually you and I have in common, we both did the UCLA program.
I love that program.
Yeah, so we have that in common, which is like 6 or 7 courses, I can't recall, that cover the college admissions process, plus a practicum.
You did it around the same time?
Right. Pretty much around the same time.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder if we were in classes together.
We could have been.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
It was...
Because it's an online course for anybody that's...
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's UCLA, but it was online.
It's to the UCLA extension. Yeah.
That was a really wonderful professional development piece for me. As I said, I did the Harvard Institute, and then the following summer, NEACAC, the New England Association of College Admissions Counseling, has Summer Institute, which is a 3-day program for people newer in the profession. And that was another amazing program, really honing skills and focusing in on the minutia of what it means to be a college counselor. And then I did conferences and I did smaller events after that, but I hadn't done a really deep dive of professional development for, let's see, that was probably 13 or 14 years after I started when I did UCLA. Some of it was...
Well, maybe it was a lot more relevant since you were in the thick of it, and you probably were able to get a lot more out of it.
And some of it was, oh, good, I did know how to do that correctly.
Yeah.
All right, good. I'm not
I've
messing
been doing
that
that right.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it was, I never thought of that before because of the online program, because we had people in that program from all over the place.
Right.
You really heard all these great perspectives.
People with a lot of different experiences.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
bringing stuff
So
to the
that
table.
was really helpful.
What's new and different in college admissions? What's changed over the years for you?
At Berwick, it hasn't changed as much as it has in other places. And that goes back again to the kinds of families that choose Berwick as a school. The pressure that's out there, the idea that there are only 25 colleges that will make you succeed in life has I mean, it's always...
And you probably see that more at a private high school than you would a lot of places.
You do.
But that's so true.
But she feels like Berwick's the exception, like that she doesn't feel that I have to go to one of these 25 schools, or, I'm just going to fail at life.
Right. And that's the third thing that I really love about my job, and my job in particular, is that Berwick kids really do open their minds to such a variety of schools. And we had 84 seniors this year.
Wow, big class.
Yeah, it was a big class. It was a lot of kids.
Yeah.
But they applied to over 200 different colleges. And so they're not just looking at the same places over and over again. They're not just saying, oh, I've never heard of it, it can't be any good. They're not just saying Kentucky, why would I ever go to Kentucky?
Right.
If I come back from Louisville and I say, I was just at the University of Louisville and you would like it for these 4 reasons, they'll say, all right, I'll go look at that. Right. And so will their parents.
Yeah.
As opposed to, well, no, you can't do this or you can't do that. I mean, certainly there can be geographic restrictions, economic restrictions. One of the girls that was off at Stanford had allergy restrictions. There's these things that you never think of that might come up in the process, and that can impact what choices a student has. But at Berwick, it is almost never, well, here's U.S. News and World Report and it's not in here.
Right.
That's not the way our families think. And it is the way families think at a lot of independent schools in higher pressure places like New York City.
Right.
My colleagues I was talking to out in San Francisco.
Yeah. And there's a lot of politics, so to speak, that go into those rankings as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so.
A woman who's in the psychology program at Stanford came and spoke with us at the conference in San Francisco, and totally, from a psychological perspective, just dismantled U.S. News and World Report when people talk about their values and what matters to them and what they want out of their college experience. None of it is what U.S. News ranks.
No.
So it's a really interesting conundrum in the business.
Yeah.
So.
It is a danger to put too much emphasis on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And obviously,
and not to say some of those schools are fantastic. It's
of
not.
Course. Yeah.
But you have to
There's
look
a lot
at
of good schools out there.
We were talking to Robin Mamlet, who was former dean of admissions at Stanford University. We had her on, I think,
a couple months ago.
Yeah. You could go back and listen to that podcast. But
like 4 now, actually.
But she said it's really important. I don't want to exactly quote her, but roughly that it was really important for your interest to match the mission or culture of the school.
And we have students who will really think about that. They've gone on the college website and they've actually read the mission statement. And, they'll sometimes joke about the Berwick mission statement because we talk about Seacoast values national excellence, and they'll make a joke about that. But but they actually know what that means to a certain level too. And they do value that. They do value that we want kids who are down to earth and humble and engage with one another and not stressed out and over the top about their own personal achievement all the time, but who do reach for that excellence. So they know what that means and they know what that does to the Berwick field. And so when they go on a college campus, they do come back and say, oh, I didn't like that. Those kids seemed too competitive. Or I didn't like that. Those professors didn't seem that engaged. They're really focused on graduate students, not undergraduate students.
Wow.
So they are aware of that and they do think about that. And some of the kids say, I know I want to go somewhere for graduate school in that field, so I'm going to go to a smaller liberal arts college for undergrad so that I do get all that personal attention and I do get the research and I do get the funding as an undergrad, that I can build a resume to go to the big name research university.
Yeah, sometimes when they don't have graduate students, the undergrads get a lot more opportunities.
Right.
But again, it's the fit. For some students,
absolutely.
They want that large university feel, and that's what's best for them. But others,
absolutely,
and they want to paint their face and stand in the stadium with 70,000 kids, and they want that,
and that big football experience, or whatever it is. Well, I just wanted to bring up, while we were talking about the high pressure of getting into the best schools and all that, is the college admissions scandal that just happened recently. Yeah. And one of the things I thought of as a college counselor from Berwick at the high school level, one of the things I was thinking of is, what were the college counselors of those schools thinking when their student got into a school they definitely didn't belong in? I mean, they must have, or not just the counselors, but just anybody from their high school.
Must have been, what is going on here?
How'd you get, right.
This isn't enough.
Have been a disconnect, and not that you can answer that, but it's interesting that nobody called them out. Right. From people that actually knew what their abilities were. Obviously, if you can get into those schools, there'd be no question. But
there are definitely times where decisions are made that we do understand there is a backstory to this, and it's not something we can share with the community. And we'll have kids come in and say, how did that kid get into that school?
Well, they know somebody.
Right. They know somebody, or they have a special talent, or, a lot of times it's also, especially off the wait list, financial aid. If a student doesn't need financial aid, they might get in with with lower qualifications off the wait list than a student who has higher qualifications.
Because schools can only take so many percentage of students.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But there are definitely also times where kids have come in and said, oh, I just got into such and such. And I thought, really? Okay, that's great. You never know. There could have been something in their essay or a teacher recommendation,
that's
or
true. Or
they nailed the interview. Whatever it might be.
So you never know. So
you never know.
You might say, take pause, but that doesn't mean there's something nefarious going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So although I do know from colleagues that I spoke to when I was out in San Francisco, they all knew who Rick Singer was. They didn't know the extent of Rick Singer, but they knew.
They did, huh?
Yeah. I mean, there's independent college counselors that around here that we say, please don't go talk to that person. Most of them are amazing. And so I do not have that attitude of, oh gosh, the independence that some other people do at all. But there are some that you think.
Some that are very
you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the people out in California said, we all knew something was up with Rick Singer.
Really?
We just didn't know what.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting.
Wow.
So they were aware of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to touch base on some of the more practical aspects of college admissions for our listeners. So what would you recommend is a good amount of schools to apply to?
What we say to the students is 6 to 8 is a good number. We really try to keep them to single digits.
Yeah.
There can be reasons why a student might go into double digits. And a lot of that could be that it's a financial aid situation. Sometimes it's that the students are looking for multiple majors. They haven't made up their mind yet. And I might want to do engineering. So these are the schools if I decide at the end that I want to do engineering. But if I really want to go into pre-med instead, there might be these others. But one of the things that we've been working more and more on is talking to students about careers earlier. Not that we want them to pick a job because they're 17.
Right.
And I was going to be a lawyer till I was 22. So what do I know?
Right.
And that's true of most of us.
Right. But to think about what are the skills that you have and the skills you want to develop, and what are the kinds of work environments you want to be in, and start to narrow some of that down a little bit more. It's really expensive to apply to colleges.
It is.
It's great now you can self-report your test scores at a lot of schools, and that saves money, but the application fees and the visiting places and doing all those things, they can cost a lot of money. So the more that you can cut down on that, the more you can focus on individual essays and really do an amazing job with those. Your chances are better at getting into schools if you are focusing on a smaller number rather than trying to communicate with every admissions officer all over the place. So that's the goal for us is single digits, 6 to 8. And of those, a couple are schools that you love and that you're confident you'll be admitted. A couple are in that mid-range, and a couple might be the dream schools that could go either way. The biggest issue we have with students is that couple that you're going to get into, because a lot of times they pick a couple of schools they know they're going to get into, but they don't really think of themselves going there, and they don't do the work to picture themselves. If I only get into these two, am I going to be okay? Right. And then April rolls around and they say, I don't think
you should apply to any school that you're not willing to go to.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you have to feel like you could be happy there.
Right,
and
exactly.
Yeah, otherwise it's a wasted application. And it's definitely important to have a couple of applications where you are confident that you'll be admitted.
Right. The hardest thing is we talk to the students at the beginning of the year when they come in September, say, okay, this is what I think my list is going to be. And we will say, this is reaching too high. You can reach a little higher.
Be a little bit more realistic.
And have that conversation about where is this falling. But we also say to the students, what's your tolerance for rejection? Yeah. And you really need to think about what's it going to feel like to get 6 no's and 2 yeses.
Well, that's a great question, actually.
And sometimes
if they have a high tolerance for it, then go for it.
Right. And sometimes students will say, oh yeah, I don't want 6 no's. And that will help us change the list.
Yeah.
Sometimes students will say, oh no, it'll be fine. I really like these 2 schools. But there was one instance where I had a student come in April, and it was the 2 schools. And he said, you're right. I thought I was going to be okay with this, and I'm not.
I'm a little crushed. Yeah.
I'm a little crushed. And he said, you should use that with future kids. Tell them that, because I'm sitting here telling you in September, I'm going to be fine. And now it's April and I'm not fine.
Yeah. And when all the other kids are hearing back and
you don't feel like you can celebrate the way the others can.
That's a psychological ingredient that I hadn't thought of. Yeah.
That's true. Yep. So in my experience, less with Christian, but more with Matthew, is that there are fewer college interviews these days.
True.
I mean, I understood why the really big, large universities weren't doing it, but even some of the smaller schools weren't requiring an interview, and I was surprised. Yeah. And I was disappointed with my second child because he would be so good at the interview. Yeah. I thought, wow, that's going to be a great asset for him.
Some of it's time. The colleges, because so many kids are applying to too many schools that the colleges are overwhelmed. And how do you know whether or not it's worth your time to interview a student who may have just cast in an application and not really been serious about it.
And that is the negative thing about the Common App. Or like some of the schools don't require an additional essay.
Right.
So other than paying the fee, which, sucks. But other than paying that, there's no barrier to entry for that application. Right. So you just say, I'll send it off. So.
Some of it, too, is colleges that are working on issues of equity and saying there are kids who can't get here to interview. And there are kids that don't know that they're supposed to do that because they don't have college counselors who are prepping them for the interviews. Yeah. And so some of it is to say, let's try to level the playing field.
A lot of high schools, we just had a podcast with a school counselor, and a lot of high schools don't have specifically college counselors in place. They're school counselors. And I
they're
remember
wearing a lot of hats.
They're wearing a lot of hats. And in looking closely at the curriculum that they provide, my memory of looking at that is it's primarily psychology focused or more counseling focused.
And class registration and monitoring the AP exams. And they do a lot that doesn't necessarily have to do with getting kids ready to apply to college.
Right.
And the kids often in the schools, the kids that are the high flyers or the kids that are doing just fine without much support don't get extra support because the guidance counselors have to really focus on the kids in crisis.
Right. So, exactly. And that's exactly right. When they're faced with a crisis, that takes precedence. Right. And juggling a lot of students. They do an amazing job, these school counselors. My
hats go off
to them. They're so impressive. But I do think schools would benefit from combining that, like the departments working together, like college counseling in conjunction with counseling. And I think they can feed off each other beautifully, but to me, they're separate entities. But
Portsmouth High School actually does that. They have a person who's a college counselor within the counseling department in general, and she's just
so probably a lot of schools are doing that. I'm just not aware.
In New Hampshire, she's actually the only one that I know of.
Wow.
It's Shannon, and she's actually moving over to Co-Brown next year, so there's a new person coming in. But she and I have worked together for a long time, and it's the only model in the state that she knows of that has that.
Well, I would think that would be such a benefit to the students, where they have somebody focusing just on that.
It comes down obviously to money. Right? Hiring another person, and that's tricky.
And also the programs preparing students in college to be high school counselors don't have college counseling components to them.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So they're not even trained to do that. Which is why you need the UCLA program.
Right, exactly. And the others that you mentioned as well. But the UCLA one is one of the premier ones, I would say. I think Berkeley has one too. There's probably a few out there.
Yeah. So does it matter if you take the SAT or the ACT? Do colleges really care? Do you think colleges look at them the same?
They do. And that's a really hard thing for parents, because when we were all applying to college, nobody on the East Coast knew what the ACT
Never heard
was.
of it.
We all took the SAT.
Yeah.
We also didn't even really prep for it, right? We just kind of walked in and took it.
I didn't even know what I was going in for.
It started on the West Coast, the ACT.
The ACT, it was more of the kind of Midwest Western test. And so when kids were mostly applying to college closer to home, the colleges on the East Coast used the SAT and the colleges out West use the ACT, and there was that. With kids applying all over now, they don't care.
They really don't. Yeah,
it is. And I wish more students would think more seriously about the ACT, because the way that your son did, and Christian did the ACT. Oh, the SAT, that's right, because he nailed that one. And the ACT a lot of times is a better test for students. And just what we say to the students, and we offer free practice options for both of them, so that the kids can sit down and take a full-length SAT and a full-length ACT and see how they do percentile-wise. Choose. And it's not an official score. They're doing it at school, and they're sitting down on a Saturday morning just like they would for a regular one, but not with the score going anywhere.
Right.
And we really are working with kids to look more at the ACT. And maybe they'll stick with the SAT, and that's great.
Yeah,
but at least they're making
at least they've been exposed, and they're making an
educated decision.
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you view as being the most important ingredients for admission
from the college side?
Yeah. Like, how do you predict which students will get in where? Yeah. What do you find are the most important ingredients?
The first thing absolutely is the transcript. And within that,
so you
not
think
just
that's
the grades,
priority number one.
Right. Not just the grades, but the classes that they've taken. If you've got straight A's, but you haven't challenged yourself in any of the more rigorous classes at your school, you're not going to be an interesting candidate to the most selective colleges, because you're going to be so challenged when you get to those places.
So if you want to get into a very highly selective college, you need to really challenge yourself throughout high school.
Right.
Yeah.
And
lots of AP courses, I'm assuming. Yeah. Or IB.
Yeah. And at Berwick, we're actually moving away from the AP into our own curriculum. So it's going to be advanced such and such. Because you're not allowed to call anything AP unless it's certified by the AP. They will sue you otherwise. So we have our own curriculum now that's going to be collaborative and project-based rather than exam-focused at the end of the year. So they're going to be covering the same material, but they're going to be learning it in a more hands-on way rather than multiple choice testing.
Yeah.
So the colleges are going to want to see that if you are interested in going into medicine, that you have gone through our most advanced biology and chemistry classes, that you've taken the most advanced anatomy class. If you are looking to be studying history and politics, they're going to want to see that you've taken the history courses that we're developing that are research oriented and that are going to also involve public speaking and debate.
Right.
So
now, and also, are colleges looking more for a focus versus like spreading yourself thin in a million directions? Do you think they're more impressed or?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Do they look more kindly on a person that's been focused?
Thank you. Yeah.
In their course
so, like
selections.
if they major in pre-med or whatever, biology, that they've shown that interest throughout their high school years versus.
They do want to see, especially for some specific programs, that you know what you're getting into. Nursing being a great example of that, because people will say, I want to be a nurse. Why do you want to be a nurse? I like to help people. Okay, but I hated biology. That's a problem. So there's other ways to help people that don't involve that. And it's hard when you're 15 or 16 and people are asking you these questions because you don't really know what the jobs entail.
Yeah, absolutely.
So really talking to the students about where you see yourself in a career, but how does that match up to the classes you like? A lot of times kids will come in and say, I think I want to do business, because they feel like they need to give me an answer about what they want to do with their life. And I'll say, okay, great. Well, how's your math class going? Oh, I hate math.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe you want to go into marketing because that's less math oriented than accounting or finance. And let's talk about that.
Economics.
Right. So talking to the students about what they really want to do. And one of the questions I've started asking kids lately is, if you could design your daily schedule any way you want, you don't have to take anything. What classes would you never take again? And a student might say, I never want to read another English book. And I'll say, that hurts. But okay.
That's a dagger in my heart.
Right. So, okay, let's think about you're not going to want to go into a major that requires a lot of reading.
Exactly.
And if they say,
question.
I really don't like my language classes. Okay, well, let's see where you can fill out your schedule with another rigorous class. But no, you don't have to keep going with that language class. But you can't just drop that for a study hall or take a class that's a super easy course to fill what would have been Spanish 5. So it's creating that balance. With our students, we're also working really hard on their health and well-being. So when you mentioned spreading yourself across every hard class there is, we don't think that's a great idea. The kids are not sleeping enough.
No.
And showing a college that I can take 6 AP classes all at once, but I'm miserable. I'm not doing my best work. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm not participating in other activities. It's not a great idea. So we're really working with students to help them cut back on their workload to a healthy level, not an easy level. Like, we want them to be challenged, but we also want them to get 8 hours of sleep.
For sure.
So how do you think that's going to be received by colleges? I mean, with the AP structure, you can potentially get college credits.
Right.
Without the AP structure, I mean, I don't know if they may look at your advanced courses and say, we know the rigor at Berwick and we could use these advanced courses in a similar way. But I guess there's possibly no potential for that AP credit as they go into college.
What we were finding was more and more colleges were giving less and less credit for APs.
Right.
So a lot of colleges now only give you credit if you have a 4 or a 5, even though 3 is passing. Some colleges only give you credit if it's a 5.
Right.
And some don't give you credit to get out of that subject area. They'll just let you move into an upper level of that area. So I got a 5 on my AP physics test doesn't mean I don't have to take physics in college. It just means I take a different physics
2 instead of physics 1.
Right. And so many students were saying, man, I took all these APs and I'm not going to get anything from the college where I'm attending. Some of it also is knowing that because the kids are covering the same material, they can do some practice practice tests on their own, which we understand is laying on another piece to them, and it's not ideal, but they will still be ready to take an AP.
They could sit for the AP exam.
They can still sit for the AP exam if they want.
Okay.
And by the time they need to do that, they will have their college list done, and they'll know what they need to get on that test in order to make it worthwhile. And so hopefully the exams they sit for will be more productive for them.
So you can sit for an AP exam having not taken an AP certified course. That's right. I wasn't sure I was aware of that.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
They'll still take your money.
Not, right?
Yeah.
Right. They'll still take your money. And if you can pass the test, then you know the material, right, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I like that approach. So instead of being stifled, I guess I'm going to use the word, by the AP structure to teach that course, you get to teach it the way you want, and then still they get material so that if they want to take that exam, that's a good combination. So I know that in your travels, you develop relationship with all the college admissions counselors, not all of them, several of them across the country, and I don't know, maybe even outside the U.S., I don't know. Obviously, that's important to understand what they're looking for in a student so that you can help better prepare your students. I guess the question is, what have you taken back from colleges when you travel that has changed how you handle preparing your students?
Colleges are so used to seeing kids who are basically being packaged at this point.
Yeah.
The essay is reread and edited by so many people, it doesn't sound like a 17-year-old anymore.
Yes.
The kids are afraid to make a mistake or acknowledge that they're not flawless. Everything that they're presenting to the college is kind of like an advertisement for themselves rather than just a conversation about who they are.
Right.
The kids who can be really authentic in their essay, in their conversations, the kids who are making their own phone calls to the colleges and sending their own emails to the admissions officers with their questions, that are just being their 17-year-old selves, are the ones that the colleges really respond to, as opposed to the kid who's trying to be perfect all the time.
That's a great tip to our listeners.
It is a great tip, and it's like almost refreshing. It's like, oh my gosh, this actually sounds like a 17-year-old kid. And yeah, that's so interesting. So it used to be the polished application stood out. Now it's almost like the authentic application.
Yeah. Some of the best essays that colleges get are the kids who write about a time that they messed up.
Yeah.
If it's a mess up you've learned from, if it's not something that was damaging and destructive and all those kinds of things.
Right.
But the time that...
But those are our greatest learning moments when we screw up.
When I failed a friend and here's what I learned about that.
Yeah.
I mean, those kinds of things, because God, we all mess up, and to be able to acknowledge that.
It's more relatable.
Right,
and
exactly.
And to see the growth from that experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great tip as well. Talk about your screw ups, people.
Right.
Yeah.
We've all got them.
Yeah.
So you said that you knew of Going Mary. We had talked about that, which is the vehicle for applying to scholarships online. It's an app, and it's also, you can just log on and create an account. Going
Any
Mary.
of our listeners that need a college scholarship should definitely give that a look.
It's a great group.
It's a great
merit or need or a combination of both. They have them all. But the other thing I was going to ask you about, if you have heard of College Scoops, which is...
That's right.
Yeah. Her name's Moira McKinnon. She started a company.
Another Moira. Yeah.
I know, it's funny because when we were talking to her, she said she hardly knows any Moiras. And I was thinking to myself,
there aren't a lot of us.
Right.
Beautiful name.
I love it. So College Scoops, and you should check it out. They provide parents and college-bound students the resources to plan the college visit. So their motto is making college trips easy, fun, and tasty. And I especially like the tasty part.
I feel like I saw this lately. It's something about the restaurants and ice cream and places around college. I did see this. Where did I see this?
Any family about to go on a college tour, you can buy her guidebooks for like $9.99, I think, for each college. But she offers a lot of free information on her website. But she will recommend places to stay, places to eat. And it all comes from the students that go to...
Yeah, she has student ambassadors
that go to school there. So what inspired her to launch this is that she did a college visit with her son, and they went to a place and there were no students around, and he didn't get a true vibe for the school. Yeah. And oftentimes when you do the college tours, the kids are all in bed anyway and the campuses are quiet, which I think is deliberate on the part of the colleges. But I think she's just trying to bring that personal flavor to the visit. Right. So you get a better sense of what the college is actually like. So for any people going on a college tour,
I just think it might be good for your students or anybody's students, that are going to visit colleges. And like Meg said, you can buy her brochure, and it's pretty inexpensive for just over $9, but she has a bunch of free information it's kind of funny because I asked her, I said, well, I'm going to be planning a college graduation next year, believe it or not. I mean,
I can't believe it.
Whatever. I don't even want to think about it. And I said, so as you know, Christian's at Tufts. And I said, so if you could start getting together.
Right. All the restaurant recommendations.
all hotels, restaurants, everything I need to do this college. So that was fun. Yeah. But it's a great resource. And I just wanted to pass along for you and your students. So.
And I do think it's really important when you're loading everyone in the family car and you're going out and visiting 8 or 9 colleges in a row, build in fun time, build in that downtime.
That's what she was saying. Yeah.
Go find an amusement park or a beach or a lake or something.
Right. And she provides
a
lot of that information to adventurous or excursions you can take while in the area. And she was saying how she planned her family vacation so thoroughly, but for the college tour, they just hopped in the car and went.
Which is what everybody does, right?
Right. Yeah. So if you want a bit more of a plan, you should check that out.
Yeah.
But,
and like she said, it's a great time with your kid. And
it is. It is a special
time. To make it a special trip is worth it if you can do it.
Just getting back to what you think colleges value the most in the application process. So you thought number one was the transcripts. Do you think there is still a lot of emphasis placed on test scores?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's hard because the colleges, with respect to my colleagues whom I love on the college side of things, they downplay that to in a positive way to reduce student stress. But the reality is when the decisions are being made, your test scores matter. And if you're not one of the students that's in at least the mid 50% range, you'd better have some other kind of a hook. Athletic, interesting program, you're going to study the classics, something that makes you a different candidate. Because
it might be a need that the school needs to fill. Like maybe they need a disc thrower or
an oboist.
Yes.
So just from a different approach, so, we've been talking about the student perspective in college counseling, but if someone wants to become a college counselor, could you just kind of say what your day, a typical day might be like for you? It's probably no real typical day, but maybe some descriptions of your days and
who you think might be a good fit and what process you would recommend.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this actually, getting ready to talk with you, Isle, and it suddenly made this connection between why I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I love this job because so much of my job is being a devil's advocate for kids. And they'll come in and say, well, I want this. And I'll say, well, really, why? And sort of argue back with them and
get them to really think about their choices.
So it's fun because I get to spend my days kind of challenging kids and watching their wheels turn and watching them come up with ideas. And you really, really have to love students, first of all, and you have to love this age group and to recognize that in a lot of ways they are adults and you have to respect their vision and you have to be ready to step back and say, this is your college process, not mine. And I know that's hard as a parent. It's even hard in my job. But you're also there to push and say, you got to explain that. You got to explain that. Why do you want to go to that school? It can't just be because they won the NCAA last year. So there's that. Right. There is a routine to my job. September, this happens. October, this happens. But it also is never exactly the same. It's different kids every year. There's a new problem. The Common App crashes, Varsity Blues happens, whatever. There's always going to be something that it shifts it every year. So there is continuity, but there's also constant change. You have to really love to write because writing recommendations is one of the most important parts of the work. And you have to be confident in your writing skills.
So you had to write 84.
There's 2 of us in the office. I had 53 this year.
That's a lot.
And I love writing. I also agonize to make sure because I feel such responsibility. So if I were not confident in my ability to write, I would be a nervous wreck every year.
The kids at Berwick are very fortunate that you really only had 44 because some school counselors are dealing with 200 or more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I can speak from Christian's experience. Moira gives each student a ton of one-on-one time.
Thank you.
Yeah. So they're all in good shape.
I'm sure you have a million emails to respond to parents as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's another good thing to know about this job is it is not 9 to 5. And it's, I didn't love being in a boarding school, like I said, because you were never off. It's not that you're never off, but when it's October 31st, like I'm on my email until 11:30 at night to make sure everybody's okay for their November 1st applications. Yeah. And that's just the job. But you get vacations and you do get that time to clear your head. Right. But when you're on, and you need to be ready for that. It's like a CPA.
There are certain times a year that you're just...
Exactly.
They're January through April is crazy.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say is you have to have somewhat of a thick skin. And this is something I've had to develop over the years because there are times when kids are are just going to freak out and parents are just going to freak out. And you have to remember they're freaking out about the process and not about you. Right. And so when someone's in your office saying, this is all messed up and you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you have to be able to take a deep breath and wait for that frustration to come out and then have the conversation. Because if you immediately go into a defensive mode, it's going to go really badly.
Yeah.
So you really have to know that the stress around this process is not directed at you, and to be ready to help people kind of get that broader perspective. It's a very
emotional time.
It's a very emotional time, and it's a privilege to be able to help people through that. It really, really is. And to work with amazing kids like Christian and all these kids that we have at Berwick, it's a joy every day. I drive up the hill to school every morning happy to be there.
Wow.
Which is,
That's
after
huge.
24 years, it's huge.
That is huge. I mean, not many people can say that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just have to be ready and willing to take on that emotional work with people.
Oh, Moira, you have been an amazing guest.
Oh, thank you.
I think any student applying to college or parents, I think you shared an immense amount of valuable information on the process, or anybody interested in becoming a college counselor
it's
as
really
well.
Fun.
It's really fun.
So
Right.
thank you so much for coming in and doing the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here, Moira. And I also just want to say that, again, my son was at Berwick. It's a great school, and I would recommend it to anybody that is looking at it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Moira. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Take care.
We knew Moira would be a great guest, and she definitely did not disappoint.
She did not. I enjoyed hearing all about her decision to leave the law school track and choose a path that was right for her.
That was interesting. And if you're still happy driving to work every day after 24 years at a job, you know you chose the right career.
Absolutely. That's so true. Also, there is no doubt if you were tuned in to learn more about the college admissions process, you hit the jackpot.
No joke. And also, if you are still with us and want to give us some love, please subscribe to the podcast, review or comment on our podcast, or even better, do all three.
Yeah, why not?
Those are our favorites.
Those are our favorites, all the threeers.
Yes. We love you.
Yes, this helps people to find our podcast, and it is our goal to help as many people as we can with choosing their college and or career.
That's the goal. Thanks, everyone, so much for listening, and have a great day. And as a final note, anyone interested in learning more about our business, academic and career advising services, we invite you to visit our website, and we will include that link in the show notes. We assist people with changing careers, possibly finding that first job out of college, the college admissions process, selecting an academic major, deciding on a career, or things of that nature. You can check it all out on our website, Academic and Career Advising Services. We are located in Kennebunk, Maine. However, for your convenience, we also offer video conferencing services. You're never too old to change your career or to go back to college, and you're never too young to begin thinking about your future. We enjoy serving people of all ages.
If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast and would like to help us out, could you please leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts?
This really helps others to find our podcast.
We would greatly appreciate it. Also, to get all the latest on upcoming episodes, please follow us on social media. All of those links will be included in the show notes. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening.